let's get to the readings. This is The Second Founding by Eric Foner. As you can see, it's late. Well, not too late, but I really am trying to get my schedule right where I could do these in the daytime, get these things done. But when you work for yourself, it's a 24-hour job. But let's go. The original Constitution said almost nothing about the right to vote, leaving regulation of the suffrage in the hands of the states. Nonetheless, radicals insisted that voting rights were the logical consequences of the abolition of slavery. Without the right to share in the governing power, the rights of George W. Julian of Indiana, or in the words of George W. Julian of Indiana, no man is really free. The government declared Senator Richard Yates of Illinois never intended to set 4 million slaves free and at the same time leave them without the civil and political rights which attach to the free citizen. Both the Constitution's clause guaranteeing to each state a republican form of government and the 13th Amendment, radicals insisted, empowered Congress to extend the right to vote immediately. Surprisingly, an even more sweeping view was forcefully expressed by James Gordon Bennett, the New York Herald's editor, now in a radical phase. The 13th Amendment, the Herald declared in January 1866, was the greatest political revolution of modern times. With this abolition of slavery, all the civil and political distinctions in the states, depending on race and color, are abolished. For the Constitution knows no distinction of color. By the spring, Bennett would be supporting Andrew Johnson in his battle with Congress, but for the moment he agreed with the radicals. As the Constitution now stands, there is nothing to justify the exclusion of the blacks from the civil and political rights of the whites. Moderates, however, believe that federal government lacked the authority to interfere with the rights of suffrage in the states. Moreover, any attempt to do so, said Senator William M. Stewart of Nevada, would be met with the prejudices, whether just or unjust, of a large majority of the white inhabitants of the United States. Leaving things up to states, they might as well have just left slavery intact, because what happened is the Confederate still runs the South. The Confederate runs this country, actually. We're under Confederacy, not just Republican, we're under Confederacy. So maybe the Union won the Civil War technically at that time, but socially and psychologically, the Confederates won. And another thing people don't take into account enough is the psychology. Changing a law doesn't mean, one, you don't change who has power, because the people who have power still have power when the law changes. It's just that they can't completely dominate and brutalize the people under them, but they can let them go and let them starve to death. And two, it doesn't change how they see those people. They don't all of a sudden say, hey, I saw you as less human, but now this law changed, so now I see you as more human. I know for a fact that white people don't see black people as human, full human beings. I know it. I also know that immigrants don't see black people as full human beings. And not just American blacks. I've seen Indian and African immigrants talking, and I've seen the body language, and I've watched, and I know that those Indian people don't think that those African people are full human beings. I know it. There will be no difficulty in Republicans agreeing on a Reconstruction policy, Stewart observed in January 1866. If it were not for the question of Negro suffrage in the South, if this question were out of the way, we could settle everything else in 2 weeks. As Stewart suggested, broad grounds of agreement did exist within the party. Nearly all Republicans believed that the federal government must gives substantive meaning to emancipation by defining and guaranteeing the freed people's personal liberty, access to the courts, and ability to compare as free laborers, protection of all men in their inalienable rights, declared Schuyler Colfax, the Speaker of the House, was the crucial task confronting Congress. Moreover, the breach with Johnson, which meant that legislation would have to pass over his veto, soon put a premium on party unity. Nearly everyone seemed to anticipate further changes to the Constitution. A flood of proposed amendments greeted the opening of Congress. Stevens himself offered ones to apportion representation in the House of debate on the basis of voters instead of population, thus significantly reducing Southern representation if blacks were not enfranchised. Annul the Constitution's prohibition on levying duties on exports, a concession at the Constitutional Convention to Southern states whose economies depended on exporting agricultural products to Europe. Agricultural products, that's slaves doing work. Make all national and state laws equally applicable to all citizens without regard to race, and bar the payment of any part of the Confederate debt. By January, according to Senator Edgar Cowan of Pennsylvania, 70 amendments were now pending. They included measures to abolish the Electoral College and, oh, that would be nice, and have presidents elected by direct popular vote. And he declared the Union indissoluble. Bar compensation to the owners of emancipated slaves, require each state to provide for the pursuit of happiness of all inhabitants without distinction of race, and change the nation's official name from the United States to the more unitary America. The proliferation of amendments became a standing joke among journalists. The New York Times chided congressmen who had grossly neglected the first duty of a member by failing to introduce one. Proposals also flooded into Washington from all quarters. A group of Iowans called for the Constitution to be amended to acknowledge Almighty God as the source of all authority and power in civil government. You see, nothing's changed. People keep saying that we've gotten better. The only thing that's gotten better, I will say, in this society is technology. We keep making better technology, which is a human thing. We've been doing that since, shaving rocks to be sharp so we can use it to cut. Human being has been doing that. Using the spear or using a net instead of a spear instead of your hands. So technology is the only thing that goes forward. But in every other way, this society is no different than it was here. These are the same arguments. The task of sifting through these proposals and drafting constitutional amendments to be presented to Congress fell to the Joint Committee of Reconstruction. Oh, I just wanted to make sure my volume was up. It's a lot of noise here. A 15-member body appointed at the beginning of the session. Over the next several months, the committee not only hammered out the content and language of 14th Amendment, but conducted extensive hearings with no fewer than 144 witnesses on conditions in the South. Testimony before the committee revealed shocking violations of the basic rights of the former slaves and widespread hostilities in the South to white wartime Unionists and Northerners, reinforcing the conviction that further federal action was necessary. The committee was constructed so as to reflect the range of opinions within the Republican Party. The chair, Fessenden, was a leading moderate, but radicals were represented by Stevens and others. These categories, however, were imprecise. Several members seem to have one foot in each camp. And in any event, the committee did not always divide along ideological lines. There were also 3 Democratic members, but they had no influence on the deliberations. The joint committees, Clark kept a journal that recorded votes but not the content of debate. A disappointment to anyone seeking in its pages the reasons for changes in wording as the 14th Amendment evolved. I mean, this is why you need to know your history, because then you'll realize we haven't gone anywhere. Or we made some strides and then the other side just took it all back. Okay? Slavery, abolition, more brutality, more restrictions to keep from runaway slaves. Okay? Civil war, mass destruction, emancipation, amendments, Jim Crow, black codes, lynchings that never ended. Civil rights, black power movement forward, and now we're right back to Trumpism, right back to lynchings. Well, lynchings never really stopped, but when I mass lynchings, mass death, mass killings, and experimentation. And black people today in the United States are worse than our ancestors were, because at least our ancestors, no matter how much brutality they faced, they still had to have a quarters in the back of the plantation, somewhere on the grounds. We're being lynched, destroyed, raped. Our brains are being raped. Our bodies are being raped. We're being brutalized, and we're living on the streets. So take that progress bullshit somewhere else. Use this information in your life and see if we can do something. Take care and be safe.